war and peace in Islam, or in fact in the Quran itself. So it's not the overall Islamic teachings, but only exclusively these concepts from the Quran itself. So of course I hear a lot of Muslim people and also non-Muslims refer to the word jihad, fight, violence, and coercive measures or tactics to force people to convert to Islam during wartime, or if they don't, then they will have to pay money as, I don't know, money to keep them alive, so to speak. So it's either you die or you be killed, or you have to pay in order to let you live. So these concepts are incredibly wrong. I cannot stress enough how these concepts and these teachings actually are violating the words of Allah in His holy book of the Quran. There are several chapters, probably 4 chapters in the Quran. I'm not sure 4 or 5, but significant amount of the Quran talks about war and the battles and the prisoners of wars and peace agreements and ceasefire. In my professional life and in my academic credentials, probably I've never mentioned this to you in my English channel, but I do have 2 master's degrees. One is in peace operations policy, and the other one is in international human rights law. It's in a master's of law in LLM in international human rights law, and particularly with that, with the international human rights law, I studied the international law. I studied the war laws, or also it's called international humanitarian law, and the refugees and migration laws. So, in addition to human rights, so these are the overall laws within my programs, but of course there are so many details. So when I study the Quran in in the lens of what is actually talking, like if I studied the international humanitarian law, or also aka war law, then I look at the Quran and the verses in the chapters talking about wars, then I make these comparisons. I see huge alignment between the modern days international law, modern days international humanitarian laws, modern days international refugees and migration laws are aligned with actually what the Quran is teaching us. But when I look at the Islamic teaching, the Islamic books, the Islamic scholars or Muslim scholars, they talk or teach exactly the opposite of what the Quran says. I will give you some examples. For example, one of the most prominent surahs that Muslims and non Muslims refer to, especially in terms of the violence, the killing, the fighting, go kill the infidels, and all of these. When people think it's like, wow, this is so brutal. This is, how could this religion or this book will be a book of love and mercy and peace? It's impossible when we see these verses. But that's what I want to refer you to. In a state of projecting and stereotyping things, let's go to the text itself. So in chapter 9 surah, it's called repentance. Repentance is not related to infidels who must convert to Islam, and that's what the Islamic teaching basically is um, proclaiming. The surah, the entire surah, talks of repentance in the Quran means like you stop the wrongdoing. It's not even about the corrective actions. This is like a consequence in order to prove that you stop the wrongdoing. But repentance itself, the stop, a complete stop or pause of the wrongdoing. And then there are the processes to make it right. To stop the wrongdoing is the first essential, vital step in order to make things right afterwards. So the surah, the first verse in the surah talks about an agreement, a peace agreement between the Muslims and non-Muslims. Of course, when and let me just refer, and I'm sure this video will be a series of videos because this topic is very important for all people to understand the details and the information in the Quran, the exact words of the Quran, and how this book does not call whatsoever to the act of aggression, regardless with Muslims or non Muslims. Absolutely no permission for an act of aggression, period. So this topic is will take several videos and it has a lot of details, but let me tell you about this chapter 9. It starts with the peace agreement. The topic of wars and battles in the Quran is like a precise reflection of life. If we think about the entire life throughout generations, throughout the human history, is there any era in the whole life on earth that is recorded and we know about? Is there any era that does not have brutality and violence, wars, massive killings, and bloodshed everywhere, in every culture, in every era, in every time, um, in every part of earth? That's why when the Quran talks about war, not because it invites people to be violent and to commit the act of aggression, but rather to understand where do you stand on the battle or the war concepts when these demon, evil, satanic things happen. Of course, we on the hands of people, of violent people, the tools of demonics in the human forms who commit these massive killings and kill innocent people and destroy earth, destroy life. You have to address it objectively. You have to address it in a way that you have to understand it in order you fight it back, in order to eliminate it. So the battles of good and evil is not an abstract. It is demonstrated throughout history in every part of on this earth in a form of violence and bloodshed. Innocent civilians, children are always, almost always, are the impacted populations and the most vulnerable population in these acts of aggression. So I will talk more about these chapters in the Quran and the verses talking about the battles and wars and what are actually Allah is telling us word for word, not address, and I'm not going to rely on any Islamic teaching. I only rely on this book and no other interpretation, just word for word. So follow me and let's continue this investigation about wars in the Quran.